Today I'm going to be talking about the care and how to propagate a Dieffenbachia. So this plant is commonly known as the dumb cane, and it is called the dumb cane because if you eat it, it could cause your vocal cords to not work for a period of time. So this plant is very toxic for children or pets. If you have pets that like to nibble on your plants or you have kids around, it would be better not to have this plant. It's a really beautiful plant though, so for the lighting requirements, this plant can withstand lower amounts of light. In fact, it would prefer lower amounts of light. So putting it in a western facing window wouldn't be the optimal place to put it. I would say in an eastern or northern facing window would be fine. I keep mine kind of far back from a north facing window, and if I feel it needs more light, then I'll move it to the room with an eastern facing window and I'll keep it there for a little bit. For watering requirements, a Dieffenbachia does prefer to be on the more moist side. So I would recommend not to let the soil dry up before you water it. Of course, you could do that. That's kind of what I do with my peace lily. I'll wait for it to droop before I water it, but that's not always the best way to treat your plants. What I would recommend is to stick your finger in, and if the top part of the soil is dry, then I think it would be safe to say that your plant could use a good watering. Of course, you always have to keep in mind that you don't want to be over-watering your plant, so there's always a fine line between over-watering your plant and giving it just the right amount of water. So if you struggle with that, I would recommend to get a moisture meter. I have one. I use it for my more picky plants, and yeah, that's what I would recommend for this plant. But this plant is pretty hardy and it should be okay. It should bounce right back if you underwater it. So still, even though this plant likes to be moist, it is better to underwater than to overwater. This plant also does like to be in more humid, warm environments. So if its leaves do start turning yellow, like I just ripped one off, it could be because they need some more moisture in the air, maybe a little bit more humidity or some more frequent watering. For fertilizing this plant, I fertilize it every time I water it in the summer, and I'm not going to fertilize it at all in the winter. I use fish fertilizer, so it's natural, but if you want to use synthetic fertilizer, you can use a gentle one. As you can see, its foliage is very beautiful, which is why it's used so much as a decorative houseplant. But yeah, as long as you're careful with it, as long as you're not eating it or you don't have any pets or kids trying to eat it, you should be fine with this. For propagation of this plant, it would be best to wear gloves and probably protective glasses, because if this gets in your eye, then it can cause some cornea damage as well as give you some rashes in your mouth and throat. But I'm feeling a little wild today, so I'm just gonna do this without any safety gear. So I'm gonna propagate this in 2 ways, and the reason that I'm propagating it is because I just like to propagate my plants. I'm just gonna cut it down and see how that goes. It has a bunch of new leaves coming in. I always like to propagate by soil and by water just to see which one's faster. Of course, there's other ways of propagating this plant, such as layering, I think it's called, air layering, where you make a cut in the plant and then you wrap soil in it and the roots should grow from there. But that's just not the way I'm gonna do it today. I'm just gonna keep it simple, just water propagation and soil propagation. Although my plant is very big to me, this is definitely not as big as this plant can get. So I'm still just gonna cut it down a little bit just to see how this propagation works. If you have a plant with a lot of stem and not really much leaves, you can cut off that stem and cut it in like 4 inches and just plant it into the soil. But since mine has so many leaves, I'm going to just take one of these offshoots from the main stem and I'm going to cut that off. Here we go. These shears have been sanitized with alcohol. Okay, so here's an offshoot. It's very cute. I'm going to put this here. Yeah, that looks nice. I'm actually just going to use regular potting mix from Espoma, since this plant, of course all plants could do well with good drainage, but I'm not as worried about overwatering this plant as with some of my other plants, and it is going to be in this clay pot. So okay, so I have dirt in my pot. I'm going to make a hole where I can put in my plant, and I'm just going to stick it in. As you can see, I didn't leave out the plant for it to heal over or anything. I just went right ahead and planted it, and we'll see how that does. For the water propagation, let me cut off another bit. I'm going to do something similar. I'm going to find an offshooting from the main cane, and I'm going to cut that off. Here I have another cutting. Doesn't have very many leaves on it, but that's alright. And I'll just put it in here. For this water propagation, I just use filtered water, and I will be changing it out every week or so, just so that it has fresh water. For this soil cutting, I'm gonna probably just spray it down to keep the soil kind of moist and not let it dry out while it's still rooting. And I'm gonna keep both of these about 5 feet back from an eastern facing window, so that they're not getting too much bright light, but it'll be kind of ambient light. I'm gonna say my plant doesn't look very different. If anything, it's kind of more bare at the bottom, but it'll grow back, and we get to see how these propagations do. We'll see how this does if this new leaf comes out. Alright, so that's it for today's video. If you guys have any other tips for how to care for this plant or how to propagate, go ahead and leave them down in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye!